Hello, and welcome to another episode of your favorite podcast ever. Let's argue about plants. That's right, the podcast for people who love plants.
But not always the same ones. I'm Carol Collins, Associate Editor at Fine Gardening Magazine.
And I'm Danielle Sherry. I'm the Executive Editor here at Fine Gardening, and clearly I've had a lot of coffee this morning, so you guys are in for a treat. Carol, what's today's topic?
Oh my gosh, it's my favorite. We're going to talk about wish list plants, the ones that we're going to buy next year.
Yes. It's our favorite time of year. Cue the jingle bells. Ding, 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 ding. We actually are recording a bit early, so we haven't here. You're behind the scenes now, listeners. We haven't even hit Thanksgiving yet, but Carol and I are making our list to Santa or the non-denominational gift giver in our lives of all the plants that we absolutely positively want to have. And it's a great time of year because we're getting all the new catalogs. We're getting all the press releases from all the different various plant companies on, hey, guess what's new and exciting? But I didn't pick only new plants. Did you, Carol?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Not brand new plants. You mean you got some? You're getting some ones you've already had?
I am getting ones that like I queued into maybe this year or last year. And I was like, oh, I should, I have one that I should have bought when I was at the nursery, but you pass it by and you go, oh gosh, that was more than I wanted to spend. And then you go back to get it and it's not there and you're heartbroken and you keep thinking about that plant for the next 9 months. Yeah, I've got one of those. So, and there might be a couple on my list, or maybe at least one that was new to me that I didn't know about. I didn't know about this plant, and once I saw it, it was infatuation at first sight for me. So, all right, kick us off, Carol. You wrote on your list. You're like, oh, okay, dear Santa, this is what I want.
All right, so I love the dahlias. And this is what
she does love those dahlias.
I do. It's a weakness. This is one that I am not leaving to chance. I have already ordered it.
And oh my gosh.
It is. Yes.
Through the list. I am getting this for myself immediately.
It's not the only one. I made a big order. This one I got 3 of though. Okay. And what I was looking for in a dahlia, so I've been experimenting with growing my own seedlings from. And so I got a seedling this year with a collarette. And a collarette, it's an open centered dahlia with a ray of petals, single petals around the outside. And then they call them petaloids, but it's like a little fringe around the center.
Oh, so I'm picturing like a court jester that has that like little like fluffy muffy thing that goes around its neck,
like a little ruffle. It is so adorable, and I hit the dahlia lottery. I felt like when I got a seedling that just happened to have this characteristic, and so a lot of the dahlias that I'm ordering have collarette characteristics. And the one that I'm the most taken by is called, it's a kind of a silly name. It's called Giggles. And
oh my gosh, I love it.
Right? Yeah. So it's kind of a fun name. It has just got this gorgeous color. It's like it's described as coral or apricot or salmon, and probably sort of a mix of those 3 colors. Like, orange isn't quite the right word for it. And then the collarette is a soft pink, or some call it light lavender, but it's like just a little bit cooler of pink. And I love that color combination. Irvin Etienne did a Bulbs in Containers article where he did 2 tulips that had those 2 colors. And they almost sort of vibrate against each other. Mm-hmm. So I'm very excited about this one. This is like most dahlias, it likes full sun, moist, well-drained, fertile soil. Gets 3 to 3.5 feet tall and wide. So it's a sort of, the ones that I grow, this is sort of the average size. It's not huge. And it's, I don't know. I don't know what else to say about it except I had to have it.
How big is the blossom, Carol?
Like 3.5 inches each one.
Okay, that's a good moderate size too.
Yes, I can't really do the dinner plate ones. I don't know why. They don't really, they just don't do well for me. And maybe I haven't tried enough, but I do like the smaller ones like this, but not tiny.
I feel like you get a plethora of more blossoms per plant too, with the smaller or more moderately sized dahlias. Like when you see those dinner plate dahlias growing, you get some, but you just don't get wands of flowers like you do with the smaller dahlia. So,
Exactly.
All right. Say the cultivar name again of this dahlia.
This one's called Giggles.
Yes, I just wanted to make you say Giggles again. All right, so while we're off to a banner start, shocking, I'm going to talk about a woody that I want. So some of you might have actually seen this plant because when I came across it last year at Broken Arrow Nursery in Hamden, Connecticut, I took some photos of it. I fell in lust at first sight when I saw this tree. And recently we featured it in the magazine as a gotta have it plant in our plant picks department because I sent it to the editor and said, I saw this tree. I really want to have it. If you need anything for that department, feature it. And it's Lady Sunshine Dove Tree. And that's Davidia involucrata, Lady Sunshine, and it's zone 6 to 8. So I'm right on the cusp of whether or not I can grow this plant. But this tree is absolutely stunning. It's partial shade. It likes moist, well-drained soil. It only gets 20 to 30 feet tall and wide, but it's almost a perfect teardrop shape habit. So the top of the tree is kind of pointed and the bottom of the tree is kind of pointed. So it's a very well-behaved, stately looking tree. Not quite columnar, but you get the picture. And really, it's all about the leaves. So if you know dove trees, they have large leaves. And I'm going to say the size of an adult woman's hand, a smaller woman's hand. It's about the size of my hand. Anybody watching us on YouTube right now, these leaves are pretty large. They can be about 5 inches across or so. And this particular variety, Lady Sunshine, is green in the middle, but then on the outside is just this really, really, really thick, creamy yellow margin, and it's super striated all the way around the leaf. So from a distance, this is just so stinking cool. It's just so ultra variegated and beautiful. And then the light catches those leaves with that creamy yellow margin, and it just glows. So obviously, Lady Sunshine, they named it correctly. If you know dove tree, eventually what the straight species is grown for is it develops this really strange looking what are called handkerchief flowers. So after a few years, the tree has to mature a few years. In early summer, these white bracts appear on the tree and they hang like white tissue paper flowers. They're actually technically the bracts. And they look like flying doves all over the tree. And this Lady Sunshine does develop that as well. So, as if the foliage wasn't cool enough, then it bursts into these beautiful bracts that have white flying all around them. And I'm totally smitten with this tree. I did not get it. I waited. I got back to the nursery probably a month later. There was none of these trees left. And I will say I passed the first time because it was pretty pricey. I mean, this was an investment and my cart was already full. And I thought, oh, not a pay week. I got to wait until next week. So I let it go by. And I've been thinking about this tree ever since. I am going to get that tree. And that is the number one plant that's on my wish list this year.
Do you have a spot for it?
I will make a spot for it. Okay. All right, Carol, what are you making spots for this year?
All right. So I've gotten kind of hooked on salvias, And I have a lot of the blue ones, and I have ones that I can grow from seed. But this year, I would love to add Golden Delicious salvia. That is a Salvia elegans, Golden Delicious. And it is not hardy at all to our region. It is hardy from zones 8 to 11. So it would be an annual for us. But I've seen photos of it, and what I know in advance is that I am probably not going to get it. It has this gorgeous chartreuse foliage throughout the season. And at the very, very end of the season, especially in longer summers, it can get red flowers. Now, I'd be okay if I don't get the red flowers. I don't count on it, but that would be a nice bonus. But what I really want it for is the foliage. It just seems like it would be so cool to have a salvia that adds that brightness to, and wherever I want it. And because it's an annual, it's not a big commitment. So it's a nice size too. It gets 3 to 4 feet tall, 2 to 3 feet wide. It likes full sun to partial shade. I think you get a better chance of it flowering if you give it more sun. And average, well-drained soil. Really not fussy at all. It doesn't, if you are in a climate that has intense sun and heat, you probably want to give it a little bit of shade because that bright foliage will tend to burn. I don't think that we have to worry about that here in Connecticut. But for us, if we put it in partial shade, it will be more chartreuse and less golden. So I will find it a good spot, full sun. And what I realized is that I kind of want my garden to look a bit like a children's book illustration. I think that's where I first got an idea of what a garden should look like. So it's just like, this is my, crayon box. This will be like where I need to stick some color. This is where I would put it.
Nice. So you're talking and I'm thinking pineapple sage. Is this golden pineapple sage?
It is. It is a pineapple sage cultivar. Yes.
Okay.
I don't think and I don't think you can grow it from seed. I think this is one that has to be propagated vegetatively. So that's why I'll have to find plants somewhere and maybe even mail order them. But yeah, it is, so theoretically, I think you can eat the flowers and the leaves or use them in tea and stuff like that.
So at the very least, speaking of children's garden, it's going to be one of those plants that, you brush up against and you're going to get that really kind of cool, juicy fruit type scent, I would think, right?
I think so. Okay.
That's so cool. Yeah, that's a beautiful plant. And yeah, there is something to be said for when you see, I was in a garden, it probably was down south, maybe North Carolina, that I think straight species of Salvia elegans, the pineapple sage. And when it was in bloom, it's just those wands of red flowers, and the hummingbirds were going out of their gosh darn minds, just like zooming all around it, because it's, it obviously has a high nectar count, and that bright red was just attracting them. It seemed like from a long way away, but yay. All right. It sounds like something to get good cuttings from too. I'm just going to say your friend Danielle wouldn't mind a cutting or two off of that.
Very good. I will keep that in mind at the end of the next season. And I might try digging it and, saving it in a plastic bag. See if I can get it through the winter. We'll see.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Irvin earlier in the episode. I mean, he had these great overwintering techniques. And yeah, people, if you need some overwintering advice on your wish list plants that might not be super hardy, except for maybe my dove tree, you would be able to go into that article, bring it in. That's where you're going to find some really good tips. Okay, my next plant again is another woody. Don't worry, I have a perennial on the list. I do, but this is magical moonlight button bush, and it's Cephalanthus occidentalis. Kolmoon is actually the cultivar name, and it's zones 5 to 9. I've wanted a button bush for a really long time. They're native to almost the entire United States except for the northern plains. That is like the one blank area of the country of which they're not native. This is a partial shade shrub. It takes average soil. It's drought and flood tolerant. So when I first came across this shrub and really, fell in love with it, I saw it in a wetland area. But Paul Capiello from the Udell Botanic Garden in Kentucky did a webinar for us earlier this year. And he was talking about all these, awesome, awesome low care shrubs that you just have to have. And buttonbush was one of them. And he showed this photo of a buttonbush growing out of a crack in the asphalt on a roadway. And then the next slide that he showed was a buttonbush growing in the middle of a pond. And both of them looked beautiful. So this is clearly a highly adaptable shrub that is a huge pollinator magnet. In early summer, usually it just has these glossy green leaves that are really attractive. The stems can have a bit of a reddish tone to it, but then it's early summer. These puffy, satellite-looking orbs of white cover the whole entire shrub. I don't think they look button-like. They kind of look like cotton swabs to me or something, but covers the whole entire shrub, and you will just think that this shrub is alive because it's buzzing with so many different pollinators, bees and parasitic wasps, the whole gamut. Hummingbirds also love it because those flowers are slightly sweetly scented and also have a good nectar count in them. No pest and disease issues to speak of. The reason that I'm going for Magical Moonlight, which is a newer cultivar, is because it stays tighter and compact. A normal buttonbush can get 6 to 8 feet tall and wide. That's a really big real estate commitment. But this cultivar Magic Moonlight is only 4 by 4. And it's a denser, a more attractive meatball looking shrub. So I think that's more well suited to, I'm running out of space and I really don't want to create another garden. So I think that that's going to be a good plant for me, especially in my transitional areas where garden meets woodland edge. I think it'll be a good transition there. I call you the native queen, Carol. Do you have any buttonbush or even naturally occurring button bushes on your property?
I don't think so, but it sounds perfect because, it's so adaptable that it could, I that's one that's been not on my radar, and I think I might have to add that to the bottom of my list.
Well, check out the photos. Actually, and we should mention, we always do every episode, but go to the show notes and you'll see photos of all these. Click on the podcast tab. But yeah, check out the flower, Carol, and tell me what you think it looks like, because I did a really crappy job of describing it.
But you say not button.
Not button. Cotton swabs? I don't know. All right, Carol, we had a dahlia from you, which I'm still very excited about. We had a salvia from you. So both things that need some overwintering, a little extra TLC at the end. Anything else that you can just stick in the ground and say, I'm done with it?
And that's what, I'm sort of 50-50, and that this next one falls into the, I'm not really going to need to do much for it at all category.
I like that. That's my jam.
Yeah. This is 7th inning stretch blue star. And that is Amsonia illustris, 7th inning stretch. And it is hardy from zones 5 to 9, so perfectly hardy here. This is a Brent Horvath intrinsic perennials introduction, and I have been seeing it. Kelly Norris loves it, and he mentions it especially in the fall when it gets this beautiful fall color. He will mention it. He'll show photos of it. He's like, I don't follow a lot of influencers, but he has an influence on my plant choices. Yeah. So this one is a hybrid, naturally occurring hybrid between Amsonia illustris and an unknown pollen parent, and I think its leaves are a little smaller than the straight species, but what really sets illustris apart, it's one of those willow-leafed Amsonias or blue stars that has a sort of a wider willowy leaf, and they're shiny. So you get the typical blue star, beautiful spring flowers that are sort of ice blue in the spring. You get this pretty glossy foliage. Some people describe it as thick or leathery, but it has like this glossy finish, especially when it first emerges in the spring, but it holds very well throughout the summer. And then it gets golden, just this beautiful golden color in the autumn. And really, like, that's what got me, because it's a time of year when I will have maybe some asters blooming, and it would really set them off, right? To have that beautiful black, golden color low to the ground. It has this dense shrubby habit, and it gets about 3 feet tall and wide. So just, like a splash of golden sunlight down, at the base of the woodsy planting. This one is also, we just got in our Mid-Atlantic regional reports and all access, we just got a regional report on blue stars, and our regional reporter, Tom, covered the straight species. So it's, it seems like, the second time I heard about it in a week, I was like, okay, all right.
Somebody's trying to tell me something.
I might need this one.
I feel like you couldn't go wrong with any blue star. I mean, maybe there's some really not great ones out there, but I haven't met one yet that I haven't fallen in love with. And there is nothing like that fall color. And it's not very often that you say that about a perennial fall color, but the fall color on Amsonia, most Amsonias, is just electric. I mean, it goes bright yellow, and the foliage holds. I mean, I think that's what perennials have against them with the fall color, because Solomon's seal will turn yellow, but then the next day all the leaves fall off, so you're not getting that persistence of color. But Amsonia holds on strong, and this one just sounds like, especially with like a bit of a thicker and longer leaf, it's just gonna hit you in the face of being pretty awesome.
You have the thread leaf one, is that correct?
I do. I have Arkansas blue star, or sometimes they just say straight up thread. It's Amsonia hubrichtii, and I've got it in several areas. A lot of my trees and larger shrubs in the landscape are now kind of shading it out in a lot of areas, but happily it has self-sown into some more sunny spots. So I'm fostering those little seedlings along, hoping that I still get some down the line as my house is engulfed in trees. Well, so currently I'm going to talk about a perennial. Actually, I've got two more. I've got two perennials to end out the show here. And the first one is a shade loving perennial. I'm currently working with Dan Hinckley, the nurseryman and plant explorer extraordinaire from the West Coast out in Seattle. And he's doing an article, working currently on an article. Here's a little preview for everybody on new shade plants, or, shade plants that are pretty unknown and fly under the radar, but he thinks deserve more love. And one of those that he's mentioning, and not this particular cultivar, but is Hepatica, which is liverleaf. And what an absolutely terrible common name. But, back in the Middle Ages, I'm sure that they used the leaves to try and cure liver disease or something like that. But anyway, liverleaf is pretty amazing. It's a 4 to 6 inch tall plant. It's a woodlander. It slowly spreads out into well-behaved clumps. And it's Hepatica nobilis, native from Minnesota to Maine, and then from Florida to Alabama. So kind of section of the country where it's native to. But the cultivar I'm going to talk about, I stumbled across at a nursery maybe last year or the year before, and it's called stained glass. So that's stained glass liverleaf, and it's zones 4 to 8. And the thing that sets Hepatica apart is that in early spring, it gets these crystal blue, clear flowers that are just these masses of little blue daisies that appear on this relatively short woodland plant. But the leaves of stained glass are purple, silver, and bright green. And they're trilobed. So think, like almost like an oxalis plant, like a house plant oxalis. But then you're also getting those beautiful blue flowers in early spring. And this is not an ephemeral. This is an evergreen. So it's going to persist with that really cool, almost like Japanese painted fern coloring on these trilobed leaves. Clearly, if I keep calling it a woodlander, you know what it likes, right? So it's going to be partial to full shade. It likes that humusy, rich, kind of moist soil. But the thing to avoid with any of the hepaticas, any of the liverleaf, don't let them be in standing water. They just don't like that. They'll rot out. But I don't have any hepaticas. I've stumbled across maybe one or two in my whole garden existence. And I really think that this is something that would make a cool understory, almost ground cover like plant to have in my garden. And it's native too. So I feel like I'm hitting a lot of different wants on my list with this little stained glass liverleaf. Terrible name. All right. We only got 4. I'm sure we could have done 20 plants on our wish list here, Carol, but what rounded out your list of must-haves top 4?
Okay. This is a plant that I just heard about last week. And this is like, occupational hazard, right? We hear about all these great plants all the time, and usually I can resist. But so the regional reporter that I was talking about who wrote about blue stars had a photo of a blue star, and I think it was actually the illustrious great species. And as a companion plant, he had this adorable little yellow daisy called owl's claws.
What?
I know. Okay. Right?
Never heard.
Okay, here's the botanical name. I don't think this will ring a bell for you either because it didn't for me. Hymenopsis hoopsii. Hoopsii. That goes with the owl, right? Yeah, and it's hardy from zones 5 to 9. The reason I think we aren't familiar with this one, it is a North American native, but not native to the eastern half. It is a Rocky Mountain native.
Okay.
So, and it stays small. It gets 1 to 2 feet tall, 18 to 24 inches wide. It likes full sun, average to wet soil. So it can take some wetness apparently, and it likes cooler temperatures. So this is probably not something that you could grow in the southeast or the deep south or anything like that. Like I mentioned, it has for its size, it has these large golden daisy-like flowers. And the petals kind of droop down a little bit like a coneflower. It does have a golden central cone, and it is very attractive to pollinators, apparently. It blooms for about a month from midsummer to early fall. Right? Okay, that's pretty cool.
Where has this plant been my whole life?
I know. And it looks great with the blue stars. The blue star bloom time somehow coincides with this one. So you get that, gold and blue combo, which I think is kind of fun. I really like the height too. This is one that I could tuck in front of something and it's just like a little accent, a little splash. And it's one that, people are going to say, what is that? And I get to say, owl's claws.
Sounds like something from the Harry Potter stories. That's crazy. I've never heard of it. Don't think I've ever seen it before. I'm going to have to go to our podcast tab on finegardening.com to see what this looks like. That is so cool. And say again, what is its max mature height?
Like 1 to 2 feet tall. It really doesn't get much taller than 2 feet. So yeah, it just puts these little daisies right down at ground level.
That is so cool. That is so cool. All right. Well, if I get a fifth plant, I think that's what I want on my list because that's awesome. Carol, I'm assuming because it's a Rocky Mountain native, this would be something that we'd have to probably mail order from, Prairie Moon Nursery or something along those lines.
Yeah,
One of
it
the
does. It
native
does
plants.
seem. Yeah, it does seem to be available. I saw it a few different places, but not in stock right now. So I will be
Okay.
checking back. As they start
Frequently.
stocking up for next season, I'm going to be checking around for this one.
Oh, that's so cool. All right. Well, so you mentioned you basically you just queued me up for my next plant. You mentioned a coneflower. I'm gonna give coneflowers a shot again. I haven't had the greatest of success with coneflowers at my home garden, which I think for me has just been an issue of drought tolerance. A lot of the Echinacea purpureas just don't do it for me. I have, however, had success with Echinacea pallida, the pale coneflower. So this coneflower almost looks like it's got parentage from that line. I don't think it does, but it's fiery Meadow Mama Echinacea, and it's Echinacea fiery Meadow Mama. So it's not it's not an interspecies, it's not a hybrid selection to the best of my knowledge, but it's zones 5 to 9. It's 20 to 24 inches tall and 18 inches wide. And it really does look like the pale coneflower had an offspring with Gaillardia, blanket flower. So the foliage is going to be thin and strappy, kind of like a pale coneflower. It's got little white hairs along the foliage. It's very willowy, very prairie plant-ish. And then in midsummer, these tall burgundy stems kind of shoot out of the middle of that massive foliage. And you get these badminton shuttlecock like flowers at the top. So it again has a very similar flower structure to the pale coneflower. But the thing is that that's where the Gaillardia I think comes in, where I keep thinking of Gaillardia because it has that sunset coloring where it's really, really yellow at the end of those long petals, and then it transitions to orange and then red, and then you hit the cone that's rather large in the center, and that's a dark burgundy color. So, it's like a sunset right on one flower, which is so cool and shocking. Totally not my color palette in my garden at all. But this is a plant that I might make an exception for. Or give it to my friend Katie, which Katie, if you're listening, she's from Arizona, so she loves every hot colored plant there is. And I think she's got the perfect spot for this fiery Meadow Mama coneflower. It's tough too. It's actually, I had seen it at first in one of Richard Hockey's plant trials out in Chicago. And when I went out, it was in the middle of a drought last summer, and they hadn't been doing a lot of supplemental watering. A lot of the coneflowers weren't looking real good, but this fiery Meadow Mama was looking. So if you've tried and failed with Gaillardia, like I have, blanket flowers, I think this might be worth giving it a shot and might be a tougher plant that gives you a very similar look and way better toughness. And now, because everything sounds better with a British accent, here's Peter to talk about his garden wishes.
We're like cats watching a laser or watching that little bar go across.
Okay. Oh, Carol, Peter does want a greenhouse. He had emailed us not too long ago about getting some tips and tricks for greenhouses, and I had no idea how to help him. You chimed in, though.
I did, and all I could say is don't get what I had. So I
So,
hope he gets a better one than the one I tried out.
so as far as garden wishes go, don't wish for Carol's greenhouse. All right.
Right.
Hey, Carol, so you know what I do wish for? an awesome expert. Were you able to get a good expert for this episode?
I was. So we are going to be talking to Laura Trowbridge from Peterborough, New Hampshire, who has done 2 articles with us, one of which has not hit newsstands yet. But let's see what Laura would like to add to her garden.
Sounds good. It is shocking to me that Laura, even knowing her garden and seeing pictures of her garden, that she even has room for more plants at this point.
Well, yeah, she makes room for new plants, and that's sort of her thing, right? So every year there is something new in her garden.
All right. Hey, that gives me hope. Now, because everything sounds better with a British accent, here's Peter to talk about his garden wishes.
Wishes? What would you wish for if you knew your wish would come true? Pretend for a minute that you're out antiquing and stumble across a magic lamp, a magic watering can. And as you brush away the dust that had collected onto its galvanised surface, out pops a genie who grants you a wish. Yes, just a single wish, because we all know that the 3 wishes business just causes all sorts of trouble. Would it be for world peace or perhaps an end to climate change? What if the wish had to be garden related? Because, well, this is a gardening podcast after all. I bet Danielle would wish for her vole population to suddenly disappear, and I'm guessing Carol would want a vegetable garden twice the size of her current plot, but one that waters, weeds, and takes care of itself. Me? Well, I think I'd wish for a greenhouse to suddenly appear in my backyard. I actually think a lot of you out there might wish for that too. There's something alluring about a house made of glass that's filled with interesting plants year-round. Not to mention that with a greenhouse, you can get a taste of the tropics in February, which, for those of us living in colder regions, seems rather magical. But here's the thing about gardening. Simply having one is a wish come true for many of us. Yes, they require work and constant monitoring. But when mid-spring comes around and the shrubs start to push verdant new growth and the perennials burst forth with blooms in every imaginable colour, the scene is pure magic. And to that I say, what more could you wish for?
Oh, Carol, Peter does want a greenhouse. He had emailed us not too long ago about getting some tips and tricks for greenhouses, and I had no idea how to help him. You chimed in, though.
I did, and all I could say is don't get what I had. So I hope he gets a better one than the one I tried out.
So as far as garden wishes go, don't wish for Carol's greenhouse. So you know what I do wish for? An awesome expert. Were you able to get a good expert for this episode?
I was. So we are going to be talking to Laura Trowbridge from Peterborough, New Hampshire, who has done 2 articles with us, one of which has not hit newsstands yet. But let's see what Laura would like to add to her garden.
Sounds good.
Hey, it's Carol, and I am here with Laura Trowbridge. Laura is an author who we worked with back in Fine Gardening, issue 177. And in that article, she told us about how she uses annual and tropical plants in her New Hampshire garden. Laura is going to be in our magazine again for issue 210. And her new topic is designing for a maturing garden. And she's going to tell us about some of the plants she cuts back every year and some of the big changes that she has made in her garden in the past year. It's so good to have you on the pod. Thank you for coming, Laura.
Thank you.
So I think one of the most interesting and remarkable things about your garden is how much space you leave for these annual and tropical plants. Is it about a half of your garden?
Yes.
And you are in Peterborough, New Hampshire. What's the climate like? Like, what is your zone? What is your growing season like there?
It's about a 5B, zone 5B. Sometimes I can push a zone 6 if I'm lucky and plant something in a protected area of the property, but a 5B I'm pretty safe with. It's pretty exposed at my house. The western winds, are a factor. It's and it's a short growing season, one of the shortest in the country, I'm afraid, but I can still grow all kinds of things. It's just at a faster pace than other parts of the country.
All right. So I thought you would be a great fit for this topic, wish list plants. What is the first plant that you thought of when I said wish list?
Well, the first plant I thought of is actually a shrub. It's a a shrub that I have one in my garden already. It was sort of a test because it's zone 6. And like I said, I'm sort of a 5B, so it's borderline hardy, but it has lived for a couple years. So I'm excited to have this in my garden and actually repeat it. I want to get like 3 more of them because I love it so much. And it's so perfect in my tropical themed garden. It's called Burgundy Spice Sweet Shrub, the Latin name Calycanthus floridus burgundy spice. What I love about it is the foliage is very dark, almost black and glossy, and it's like a calycanthus foliage. It's a broadleaf. So it really stands out in the garden. And because it's borderline hardy here, it doesn't get as big as it would further south. So it probably won't get more than 4 feet tall and wide here, whereas further south it could get to be 8 feet tall and wide, which would be too tall for my border. But I also know that it does well being pruned and trimmed throughout the season because I've done a little of that and it still looks fine. So I feel like I can keep it to the right size for my garden. So I'm excited to repeat it as a design element. It will go with everything in the garden. It's just a great partner for any plant in my garden. And I just think it's a great design element. So I'm really excited to get 3 more of them and have that be one of the main features in my garden.
So it has that really dark foliage. Does it flower? Can you see, does the flower stand out against the foliage?
The flower doesn't stand out as much as it would on a native one, but they're burgundy, just like the regular calycanthus. They have little burgundy buttons that are fragrant, which I think that looks pretty cool, having that color, those 2 colors together. It's the sort of burgundy flower, sort of reddish flower on a burgundy leaf. But for me, the main show is the foliage. It's really all about the foliage for me.
Very good.
It stays dark and glossy all summer long. It never fades. It just always looks good.
Awesome. What else do you have? Are they all shrubs or do you have a mix?
I have a mix. The next plant is a biennial. This one is called salsify, and its Latin name is Tragopogon porifolius, and it goes by also oyster plant, or purple goat's beard is another name for it. It's a biennial wildflower, and the reason I love it is because it's so unusual looking. It's a vegetable. You can actually eat the root. It looks like a carrot or a turnip, and it tastes like an oyster, which is why they call it an oyster plant. But what I don't plan to eat it. I plan to grow it in my garden because it's such a cool looking plant. It's a biennial. The first year, it's a rosette, a grassy rosette that you have to be careful not to weed out or to mulch over. So that's going to be my challenge. But the next year, up comes a 3 foot tall plant with a dandelion shaped flower that's like a mauve purple. And then at the same time, the buds, it's blooming, it's budding and blooming and seeding all summer. So it's this all on one plant. You can have a flower, a bud, and a seed pod. And the seed looks like a dandelion puff. So they're all happening at once, which I think is so pretty. And the hope is that those dandelion seeds, puffy seeds, will have been blown by the wind across my garden, but also I was taking them and throwing them around the garden all summer long. So I may have tons of them next year, or I may have none of them. It's a mystery. I'm very excited to see if I can grow it.
That's great. Wow. I can't wait. You'll have to let us know what happens with that one. So I'm betting there is at least one tropical on your list, or an annual. Do you have something like that?
Yes, I actually have a tropical. It's called Leonidas leonoris, or lion's ear, or lion's tail is another name for it. It's a tender perennial here. It's zone 8 to 10, whereas I'm like in a 5B here. And I try to overwinter it, but I have not had success. So I'm going to be in searching for it for next year, because it is such a unusual and wonderful tropical looking plant for my garden. It gets to be 3 to 6 feet tall in one season and 3 feet wide. And it has these flowers that kind of grow up on the stem that look like lion's tail. That's how it gets its name, or lion's ear. They're orange, and they just keep growing up the stem up to like 6 feet tall. It just is such an unusual looking plant, and it goes with everything in my tropical garden. The thing that I'm excited about is finding one that's not a small plant. I want to find one that's been overwintered already in a greenhouse somewhere, in a nursery, because the bigger I can start it with, it'll have a woody base already, and I can get a bigger plant in one season. As I said, I have a short growing season, so to start with a bigger plant, I will have a bigger plant by midsummer. So my quest is going to be to find one that's been overwintered. And there's a nursery that I will drive 3 hours to go find this. And I think that I know where to find one. So I'll be looking for that next year.
Excellent. Do you have one more plant to bring us home here?
One more that is a total reliable tender perennial for me is salvia amistad. And that plant is just totally, I've grown it for years and it's just wonderful in my garden. I love to repeat it like 3 times at least. I have a very big border, so I can do repetitions of big plants. And this one is great because it's such a beautiful saturated purple color with black calyxes. And it just looks so great in my tropical border to offset all the bright oranges and yellows. And it can grow to be 4 feet tall, 4 feet wide quickly. I planted in the end of May. By mid-July, it's 4 feet tall and wide. And the butterflies love it. The bees love it. The hummingbirds love it. It's deer resistant. It's just beautiful and very tropical looking and very just covered in blossoms. It's very reliable that way. So I will be definitely looking for at least 3 of those for my garden next year.
Oh, wow. I think I've got to add a few more to my plant list now because these are all great choices. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. It's been a pleasure to have you.
You're welcome. It was fun.
It is shocking to me that Laura, even knowing her garden and seeing pictures of her garden, that she even has room for more plants at this point.
Well, yeah, she makes room for new plants, and that's sort of her thing, right? So every year there is something new in her garden.
All right. Hey, that gives me hope.